Hello everyone, welcome to another Healthy New Zealand podcast. Today my guest is Andre Obradovic. Gosh, I should have checked how to pronounce that properly, Andre. Andre is one of Australia's leading triathlon and marathon coaches and health coaches. So I've only just recently come across Andre's work, but it really resonated with me with my thoughts about exercise and nutrition and health in general. So I thought it would be great to introduce him to you all. So Andre, thanks for coming along today and sharing some of your bits of knowledge with us.
That's all right, Susan. Thanks for having me on, and I hope the listeners get something out of it that's going to help them make a little bit of a change in the way they think and the things they do. And by the way, I love New Zealand. I've got my Taupo 70.3 drink bottle here, and I've been there twice, December last year, which was amazing, and the year before. And as soon as we're allowed to come to New Zealand after this COVID mess, we'll be coming.
Oh, fantastic. You guys are back in lockdown too, aren't you?
Yeah, started this week. We're not allowed, we're doing the New Zealand thing. So we're not allowed more than 5 kilometres away from our home, which makes it hard when you're supposed to be running 30 kilometres. So, yeah, but anyway, we'll survive. It's only 6 weeks.
Yeah, I know. It's been a challenge. Anyway, let's talk about more positive things like how we get our health back.
Yeah, exactly.
So would you start off, just give us a bit of background about you, because, you know, that'll be interesting for me as well. So I believe you came from a military background, went to corporate, and now you're one of Australia's leading coaches. So how did that all happen?
Okay, how it happened was I did nearly 20 years in the Australian Army as a soldier and then an officer. Left there and went into the corporate world for about 16 years. And to cut a long story short, I got burnt out in the last job I had in the corporate world, not very well at all, and basically had to have 6 months off and sleep, and realised that I didn't want to, and I probably couldn't go back to working in a high pressure corporate job. I had a passion for running, even though I was doing conventional running, which we'll talk about more later, and I thought I was healthy, but I was actually quite fat, even though no one had told me I was, because I was just normal like everyone else in the office or down the street. I realised that I had to do something with my leadership experience. I did a coaching certification through the International Coaching Federation because I thought I'd go back and do executive coaching. So I did a really substantial diploma-based course. And then at the end of it, I thought, I don't want to go and wear a suit again. So I turned that into really changing my life by doing the Primal Health Coaching program through the US with Mark Sisson. I became an ambassador for the Noakes Foundation, Tim Noakes, and that group, and I did the Real Meal Revolution coaching course. I did, at the same time, I went to the US to run the New York Marathon, which we can talk about more one of the times. I've done it 3 times. And at the same time, I went to the US that the marathon was on and did my USA triathlon certification, because when I turned 50, I bought a bike and went from running marathons to doing triathlons. And I did my coaching certification, and I realized that then I came back to Australia and I thought, this is really actually what I want to do. I want to help people lose weight, because I was going on my own journey with low carb at the same time. I did my Cert 3 and 4 fitness, personal training, group fitness training, and allied health as well. So I did all these qualifications, and that was about probably 6 to 8 years ago. And I started to run my business called Which Path Coaching, which predominantly focuses on weight loss through proper nutrition, triathlon coaching, and marathon and running coaching. And that's pretty much what I do full time, but it all starts from a basis of helping people make mindset changes and lifestyle changes, focusing on sleep, proper nutrition, and challenging beliefs, as Tim Noakes says, challenging their beliefs about why they are like they are and why they can't progress when they're running 70 kilometers a week. And that was me, essentially. And do you want me to go into a little bit about what actually, where I was and how I made that change physically and with my diet?
absolutely. I think people will find your personal journey really interesting, because then we can go into, there's a lot of things in there to unpack. So I'd love to talk to you about the changing of mindset. Really want to get into a bit of the, the style that you coach and the math training, and then talk about, sort of obesity and overfatness. But if you could tell us a bit about that own journey for you, which I think would be quite inspiring for people to hear.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I think it would have been in about 2011. We'd come back from a trip overseas, and when I left the army, I was 65 kilos, and when I left the army, I went to this corporate job, and my boss said, "Oh, you'll get fat like the rest of us," because he was a little bit tubby, because I didn't really drink alcohol, and I said, "No way, mate." I said, "If I get like you, I'm leaving, right?" But I did get like him, or not like him, but almost. So I went from 65 kilos up to a weight of 80 kilos over the period of about probably 10 years. And I didn't realize I was overweight. And as I said, people wouldn't have said I was fat. But if I look, I'll share you a photo for the podcast later of what I was then and what I am now. And what happened was we came back from this trip, and I was in the shower, and I got out of the shower, and we have these big mirrors in our bathroom. And I looked at myself and I thought, something's gone wrong here. I just looked in the mirror, looking, I wasn't looking good naked, trust me. And I thought, I got to do something. And I thought, right, I am going to ring an exercise physiologist, and I'm going to run a half marathon. I thought, I've never run a half marathon. I did a lot of hard stuff in the army, but never a half marathon. And I went and saw this exercise physiologist, and typically he just said, well, you're lazy, you need to exercise more, nothing about food. And so then I set apart this path of killing myself running, and I killed myself running over a period of 5 years, and I lost a few kilos, not much, and I was always injured. I had to go to the physio twice a week to have my calves massaged because they were killing me. My diet, which I thought was healthy because I was following the Australian food guidelines, which are similar to the New Zealand food guidelines. They should be called the Australian New Zealand obesity guidelines. Eat like this and you'll get obese. And I was always starving. I was driving myself nuts, eating every 2 hours of the day. So to any of your listeners, if this story sounds familiar, don't worry, there's a solution. So keep listening. And, I was a carboholic, and, I would get down to maybe 72 kilos if I was lucky before a race, because I was running so much and starving myself. And it got to a point where I hired one of Australia's best, most well-known nutritionists or dietitians, and I actually would go to Sydney to see her. And I was paying her $200 an hour to keep me fat.
Incredible.
Because I was, and look, it's not her fault.
No.
She's just doing what she thought was right. And I was eating low fat, high carb. So I couldn't eat any fat because apparently that makes you fat, which we all know is a total lie. I was starving myself, and I was tracking calories, and she put me on a calorie deficient diet, which I had this big spreadsheet, and I had to track everything and send it to her. And that was stressful. And I wasn't, I might lose a few kilos when I was running a lot, but then as soon as the marathon was over, I'd have a rest for a week, and I'd put 2 kilos on in a day. And it just was crazy. But I thought that was totally normal, because the running magazines and the media and the gyms were all promoting that. And I would go to the gym and I would do a 36-kilometer run on a treadmill, killing myself. And all these people were like, wow, you're amazing, you're a legend. I was stupid, totally stupid. And at that stage, I was running based on the orthodoxy of heart rate approach, which is 220 minus your age. But I actually went and did a max heart rate test. So I had zones dialed into what I thought was the right way to train, which is totally opposite to how I train now, which we can talk about more as well. But that was me. I was just following what I call conventional stupidity, which a lot of people think or call conventional wisdom.
Excellent. And I mean, you and I both now, I mean, we both see this day after day, don't we? I mean, this is what I see. I see corporate people, they, you know, want to lose a bit of weight. They decide, okay, I'm going to sign up and run a marathon. That's my motivation to go and lose some weight. And it doesn't work. Often they get fatter by the end of it, you know, often, you know, all that stress and cortisol and all that kind of stuff adds to the weight gain. They get injured, they run through the pain, and there is a much, much better solution out there.
There is, and that's what I did. I found one of the most important life-changing things in my world. So do you want me to explain how that all happened?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I was talking to my coach, Brian Rabinowitz, who's a fantastic guy. And I was saying, look, I'm frustrated. I want to drop more weight. I've got this little roll of fat here. And he said, oh, have you heard of this thing called paleo, this Pete Evans guy? And I'm like, oh yeah, I saw him on the TV. He goes, well, you know, there's also this thing called low carb. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, well, there's this growing thing that I'm hearing in the media and on the running circuit talking about this guy called Tim Noakes and Stephen Finney and all these people. And he said, this Stephen Finney guy is coming to Australia to do a talk at the Epworth Hospital. You should go and just have a listen, because they reckon you can train your body to burn fat instead of carbs. And I'm like, what? Are you serious? He goes, look, Andre, you know, I can't go, but maybe you should go. And I thought, look, I'd really respect my coach. He's a top guy. So I went to this talk, and this talk was, I think, November. This whole timeline's on my website, by the way, if anyone's interested. The whole story is on my website, in a timeline of when I was fat to how I changed everything. So I think it was December in around 2014, around that time, or 15. And it was amazing. I went into this talk, and he was doing two talks, one for diabetics and one for athletes, and I went to the wrong one. I went to the one for diabetics. So I walked in, and there's all these huge people. They were either huge or skinny. So they're either type 1 or type 2. And generally my experience is type 1 are skinnier. And I'm like, I'm in the wrong place. But I listened to the talk, and at the end I said, look, you know, I'm at the wrong place. I'm a runner. Are you telling me I can run a marathon without carb loading? And he said, absolutely, and it'll totally change your life. So I bought his books. He's a great sales guy, this guy. I bought his books, and I went home, and I said to my wife, right, no potatoes, no bread, no pasta, no rice. I'm changing how I'm eating. And that was it. And I just went cold turkey, 100%, boom. And I was down to 65 kilos, you know, within about 3 or 4 months from 80. And sure, my running was affected badly, but I knew that would happen. And then over probably 12 months, I think I was down about actually 69 kilos. Anyway, I lost all the fat. And now in 2020, which is like 6 years on, I'm 7% body fat. My weight is in a range of 62.3 or 4 to about 65. And that's generally water or food. I eat twice a day. I do time restricted eating, and I've done that for 6 years. Sure, I eat some bread once in a while, sourdough, you know, once in a while, with some butter, not often. I don't let it addict me, but I've eaten pasta once in 8 years, and it's absolutely filthy, and I will never eat it again. I was sick the time I ate it in that 8 years or so. I might have a spoonful of brown rice once in a while. I don't drink alcohol. And essentially that's what I did. And it was all from going to that meeting. That was the food side of it. And for me, that has been just such an amazing change. I get my bloods done every 6 months. I get homocysteine checked, which most people wouldn't know is a longevity marker, and most doctors wouldn't ask you to check that. My triglycerides and cholesterol and blood sugar have totally changed. So before I made this change, my doctor, or as I was going to do this change, my doctor, who I sacked, told me that I would need to go on a statin because my cholesterol was too high. At that stage, it was like 5.8, which is just over 5.6. Well, now it's 6.6. And I don't have a problem at all, because the real doctor I work with says that's amazing, because my triglycerides are like 0.6, blood sugar's low. There's no small dense LDL in my, because I had a subfractional test done. So Ken Sickerus, if people don't know him, and I'm sure you could probably put a link on the blog, is an expert in Melbourne pathology around cholesterol, and he says doctors are 30 years out of date. So I had these tests done by my doctor, and I tracked my bloods. So from the food side, it's been a total success. And from an athletic side, I've totally changed how I train as well. But that's sort of the food side of it, is, intermittent, I wouldn't say intermittent fasting. It's more like time restricted eating. So I eat at about 11 o'clock and 6 o'clock, and it's all low carb. And sure, I eat some good quality bread once in a while, but I avoid gluten. I avoid dairy, apart from butter and a tiny bit of lactose-free milk, like a teaspoon, in my caffeine-free tea that I have. But I would never go and drink a glass of milk or have a milkshake ever again in my life, or eat meat pies or things like that. But yeah, that's the nutrition side of it.
Great. Fantastic story. And so the exercise side of it, I would like to touch on a little bit of that with you about training, because you've got considerable expertise in training, and it would be really good to sort of outline your philosophy for people, and maybe give them some guidance about how they should be approaching their training, and why what they do and when they do it and how they go about it is so important.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, that was the second thing I changed, is I lost my weight first, and then I changed my training. So I basically couldn't train for 6 months. I could jog, but my whole energy systems were in disarray. So I used that as a time to think about my training and focus on the nutrition and losing the weight to get proper body composition. That's my first advice to anyone listening to this. If you are trying to lose weight by exercising, you are following a path to hell, and it will never work. If you're older, maybe if you're younger, it might work, unless you're obese or really overweight. If you're just trying to trim 1 or 2 kilos, yeah, sure, it'll probably work if you're not in a highly stressed life. But if you're trying to lose anything over 5 kilos, exercising to do that will never work. You'll just put it all back on, because you'll probably be following a calorie deficit model, which is totally BS. It's all invented by the food industry and the fitness industry to tell us what we want, because people like to be told what they want, which means, yeah, get up at 5 o'clock, go smash yourself at the gym, and then you can go and eat your porridge and have your cappuccinos and your donuts. And as long as you're expending more calories than you are putting in, then you're okay, which is totally wrong. Just like Subway with their whatever calorie breads and stuff. Oh, it's okay. I've done a circuit and a CrossFit workout where I've done 3,000 calories. Now I can go and eat 2.5 of a Subway burger thing. Well, that's totally wrong. So, and I'm going on a tangent there, but
What about Coke with their, Coke is part of a healthy, balanced lifestyle, for goodness sake.
Yeah, totally wrong. So in terms of exercise, I lost my weight, and then I started to once again take advice from Brian, my coach, and he said, "Oh, have you heard about this aerobic training, this MAF method, MAF, the Maffetone method, obviously from Phil Maffetone?" And he said, "You should think about this. So let's change your training from doing all of this, typical, my max heart rate was 196. So 196 minus your age develops all your zones essentially, or there's then percentages based on that. So we changed my training, and I started to do low heart rate training. So, that is 180 minus your age. And that has been amazing for me. So first principle is get the body composition right first, and you do that by eating low carb. And second thing is then move to aerobic training, because as a 55-year-old now, these numbers, and I can prove these numbers, I've got all the data. If people like, that's amazing, I can't believe that. Like, I have no athletic background, right? I was a fat little kid who couldn't run, didn't swim, did no sport. I went to Duntroon as a 21-year-old. I was an average runner, average sports person, right? Now I am in the top group of my age group. So I've just come second in the Comrades virtual marathon in the 49 to 54 age group. I came second with a time of 40:32, which is about 4:04 minute pace per K.
That's a tough marathon, that one.
Yeah, well, this is like the 10K, but I won the 55 age group because it was my birthday 2 days later. So if I'd done it 2 days later, I would have won my age group. And same thing, I just came second in the Gold Coast virtual 10K marathon with a time very similar. Now, that's with no running background of history of an athletic person, right? But the important thing is my heart rate. So my average heart rate for that run was 133 beats. And I was running fast, like 4-minute pace for 40 minutes for me. That's my threshold. So that's fast for me. But, that was my average heart rate. Now, when I do a marathon, I'm aiming for a sub 3:30 marathon this year. My average heart rate will probably be about 125 to maybe 130. And it'll be comfortable. I'll be able to talk all the way because I'll be running at, under 5 minute, just under 5-minute pace. And 5-minute pace is nothing. Like for 5-minute pace for 10Ks, my heart rate's like maybe 98 or 100. So, and I know people might be like, that's crazy, but this is what happens when you pair good body composition and low carbohydrate nutrition with MAF training. And MAF training is about having the discipline to understand that you want to build your aerobic engine, lower the cortisol and adrenaline and stress response in your body, because all that does is cause inflammation. And that's what was happening to me when I was a little fatty, 80 kilos, running 70 Ks a week, eating all that sugar. I was going to the physio twice a week for calf massages because I was working in high heart rates, and the sugar was causing all this inflammation in my body. So when we remove all that stress hormones, the cortisol, the adrenaline, and we're able to run and breathe through our nose using nasal breathing without using our mouth when we're running at 5-minute pace, the body is so calm, and it's just a diesel motor that can go for hours. And, the MAF training is probably the best method for superior athletic performance. And I know I'm just going to get faster as I get older because of that balance of food and the MAF training methodology. Now, yeah, that's essentially what I do and how I've applied it, and some of my results. And as I said, I've got all that data, and it's all true,
So for the listeners, I did a fantastic interview with Phil Maffetone fairly recently, and we talked a lot about the overfat pandemic, but I do have the MAF, his training principles are on my website and links to his website as well. So people can go along and have a look at that and follow that. But people can actually contact you, can't they, Andre? And you can actually help guide them through this process. Do you do virtual training as well?
Yeah, so all of my clients are remote, especially with COVID. So I have clients all around the world. I use a system called Today's Plan, which is some people will know of a thing called Training Peaks. It's a way that you write programs and workout sessions, and it's all through an app on the phone or the computer, and your Garmin account, a Garmin watch or some sort of training device connects into that, and all your data comes in, and the coach can look at all your heart rates and your paces and your power, whether you're on a bike or whether you're running. So I write programs for people and build plans for them that are all using this system, and it's all based on MAF training. So I won't work with anyone unless they're using this Maffetone approach. So if someone comes to me and they're overweight, which often happens, they'll go on my website, fill out my form to say they want to do endurance coaching, and it might say, because there's specific questions there about what do they eat, what's their body composition, and often, more than likely, it'll say, well, I'm overweight, I want to exercise to lose weight. So then I'll send them an email and say, well, that's not my approach. You need to lose the weight first, because most people think you've got to exercise to lose weight. So if someone isn't prepared to work with me on low carb nutrition to change their body composition, then I won't work with them as an athlete. I'm just not interested. So I only work with people that want to do MAF training. That's how, so I'll throw away money. I'll throw away people that want to pay me unless they want to work the Maffetone method way, because it's a health. I'm responsible for people's health, and that is a healthy way to train. And training in the old method, the conventional method, which I call conventional stupidity, is not healthy at all. It might be about fitness, whatever that means, but it's not about health.
I think that's a fantastic approach, and I think your results speak for themselves as well. And like I said earlier, you're one of Australia's leading coaches. So,
well, I would say thank you, but more so in regards to low carb and MAF training, I would say, yes, there's not many of us that do this. There's a lot of other coaches that have a lot more skills and science, and be able to look at training stress scores and all of these other scientific things and things that I have no idea about. My basic way of training, which I am good at, is the MAF training and strength training, and pairing that with low carb nutrition and helping people be healthy as they train, not just get results on the podium or things like that. So because there's not many of us that do this, because we get a bit ostracized in the community by people. That's why I don't go on Facebook anymore. I have no Facebook account, because you get sick of people criticizing you.
Oh, well, I think the results speak for themselves. So let's talk a little bit about the gym and strength training and the role that has in body composition, and also preparing you for endurance training. Because, again, my experience when I had my gym was, people come in and they say, oh, look, I just want to join up and ride the bike, or I want to join up and use the rowing machine, because I just, I don't want to build muscle. I just want to tone up. I don't want to get big. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah.
I've spent my whole life trying to get big, and it hasn't worked.
I think in terms of, I guess two ways to answer that question. There's a general population answer. So maybe let's talk about the general population first, and then I'll talk about the more advanced approach that I use for people that are athletes. So, I think most people associate the gym with losing weight and cardio with losing weight. So when we say, you should be doing resistance training, some people are a bit wary of that because they don't have experience using gym equipment. So I think explaining to people that osteoporosis can be not negated, but we can improve we can reduce the susceptibility that we have to osteoporosis and quite a few other metabolic disorders by doing resistance training is very important. It's not all about cardio. So, and resistance training, as you know, depending on your age and your flexibility and your ability, can be anything from doing resistance band training to body weight exercises to then using machines in the gym, not the big heavy weight bearing stuff and free weights. So my approach with anyone that I would work with, or the general population, my advice would be, the first thing is have some sort of assessment to make sure you don't have any specific injuries that can be aggravated by doing whatever you're doing. And then if you have no background with lifting heavy stuff or working in a gym, the first thing to do would be body weight exercises. And I would be promoting things called Primal Movements. And this is all on my health and wellness app as well, that people can download. So Primal Movements are things like body weight squats, push-ups, chin-ups, and planks. And these have all regressions and progressions, which means, you know, most people can't just get up on a bar and do a chin up, but if you put a chair under the bar, you can stand on the chair and pull yourself up and just lower yourself down. And the same with push-ups. You can do push-ups against the wall, and as you get better, you come lower, and then you go to the ground and you use your knees. So first step is, for the general population, is always Primal Movements. And once that's been done for several weeks and there's no injuries and people are feeling more confident and strong, then you would go into a gym and get someone who's trained to write your program to use machines. And these are all those big, you know, like Nautilus machines and life gym machines, where you're not having to get dumbbells or big heavy squat racks and bars. So you would then use those machines for a period of time to build strength and bit more mobility and confidence. And then after that, if you really got into it, then you would actually possibly progress to doing full-on strength training if you wanted to build size, definition, muscle. And once again, you know, my approach to that for an athlete is a thing called maximum sustained power movements. Once again, all of this is in my health and wellness app. So that's sort of like, for the general population, is what I'd be suggesting and recommending, because especially for bike riders, you know, a lot of bike riders who don't run and don't do gym work have terrible bone density. In fact, bike riders have the worst bone density out of all athletes. Cricketers have some of the best because they're running up and down and running on the pitch and things like that, and hockey players. But bike riders, if you're a bike rider listening to this and you don't get in the gym, when you're 80 and you fall over and break your hip, you can say, oh, I remember that guy suggesting I needed to get in the gym to build my bones. And don't drink milk, because that makes it worse as well. So that's sort of general population. Any thoughts on that? And then I can maybe talk about how athletes might want to work differently in the gym.
I think movement, quality of movement, is something I focus a lot on. People have very poor quality of movement. They have muscular imbalances. They're tight in some muscles, you know, maybe tight and weak, maybe tight and strong, that kind of thing. Do you deal with that at all in terms of, you know, improving the quality of people's movement?
No, I work with a physio who consults with all my athletes. So what happens is I like to work with experts. So I say, I know what I'm doing. And if I'm not an expert or highly skilled in an area, I hand them off. So I have a physio that works with the AIS, the Australian Institute of Sport. She's here in Melbourne, and she does virtual consults like this, or in-face consults with all of my clients wherever they are in the world. And she then shares what they have to do, and then I build that into their program and I add to it. So that's how I do that sort of stuff. I don't get into, if I have an athlete come, they have an assessment with her. If they're not prepared to pay the money to do an assessment with her, then once again, I probably won't work with them, because we need to make sure that we fix the flexibility, mobility, and stability. So yeah, I take what she does and then I put that together in today's plan, so they have it there with videos and all that sort of stuff.
But that's still part of the foundation of.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and often, you know, part of my programs is everyone will do yoga, 15 minutes or 7 minutes of yoga each night, depending on what they're working on. And that's all video based, you know, all built into the app. They press a button and it plays a video, it tells them what to do. So yoga and stretching are key elements of this whole health and fitness and endurance training as well.
Yeah. Because I think lack of mobility is one of the biggest issues that I see, you know, range of movement around joints. I think it's super important. Okay, cool. So do you want to get on with how you would work with an athlete?
Yeah, well, in terms of strength training, if that's what you mean, my approach would be runners and cyclists need to make sure we're activating the appropriate muscles to improve our power production. So, I say there's a couple of things. Firstly, it's body composition, and we fix that by low carb nutrition. Then it's aerobic capacity, and we do that by using MAF training. And the third thing is power production and strength, so that we don't fatigue in a race. Because when you look at someone running a marathon at 36 Ks, most people are bonking because they're eating high carb, but people that aren't eating high carbs and are even on low carb diet will be, their hip flexors will be starting to fatigue, their glutes will start to fatigue, and they drop their hips. So working on their strength for the appropriate muscles is really important. And for a runner, we need to do a lot of single leg work, because running is a single leg sport. So, I have a 45-minute program I have my own strength coach as well. And once again, depending on the athlete, they might work with my strength coach, or I work together with them on their program. But single leg work, where we're really focusing on good quality movement, where we video our movement and share that with each other to look at the quality of the movement patterns, making sure the feet are in the right position. So I won't wear shoes when I train in the gym. I go bare feet or socks, because I want the foot to be planted properly on the ground and have no instability from my shoes. But a lot of single leg work and a lot of low rep and heavy weights. And as I said, there's sort of two approaches I use. This maximum sustained power approach, which was developed by Jacques Devore, which is in my health and wellness app. But then also another approach, which is similar, but it's less sets and reps and less fatiguing, which is, single leg squats, static barbell lunges, where you hold your position at the bottom of the movement and power up. Really simple, basic, strong movements, and you don't have to do a lot of them, but they're good technique with heavy weights, low reps, and that's how I would work, or how I recommend athletes work together. Not doing 10 and 12 reps. So I do 6 to 8 reps at the most of my exercises, and that's done in about 45 minutes. And I do that 2 to 3 times a week. And often I'll do that after a hard run or before a hard ride, vice versa. So I'm working on fatigued legs as well.
Yeah. So just for the people listening, we are talking about improving endurance, our endurance training here with this program. So this isn't we're not talking about a bodybuilding program or a muscle composition program, are we? Just so
No.
Clear about those reps and sets and things like that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned fatigue, and I think that's another hugely misunderstood idea in the fitness world. Do you want to talk a bit about fatigue and why we don't want to be always so fatigued in recovery?
Okay. So if we are finishing our sessions and we feel exhausted, we are following the wrong approach, in my opinion, right? Because, we have this mindset that says we want to emphasize how high our heart rate goes. This is the gym mentality, and most training approaches is we want to push our heart rate high. So how high did I get my heart rate? And also, how many calories did I burn? And I would say that, well, that approach leads to ill health, overweightness or overfat, the overfat pandemic, inflammation, stress all day, hunger. It makes us starving. It increases it makes our hormones go all over the place. Cortisol, insulin, our blood sugar just goes crazy because we're doing this blood sugar roller coaster, and our liver would be highly stressed by sometimes having to convert different things to different energy sources depending on what we need. And if you think of it like this, Do you want to be a Mustang or a Honda Civic? So a Mustang has this massive engine that purrs all day and can go from 0 to 100 in a split second, but it's not working? Or do you want to be a Honda Civic that's revving the engine like hell and burning black smoke out of its engine that's filthy and highly noisy, and it wears out quickly? So if you want to have this Mustang engine where you can run as an example for me, I've got a Mustang engine, a massive Mustang engine, right? If you want to run a marathon in 3 hours 30 and have a heart rate of 125, is that better than running a marathon in 3 hours 30 and having a heart rate of 180? Of course it is. Our heart can only beat about 2 billion times, I think they say. So why would you want to waste your heartbeats exercising? It's all about how much power and speed you can put out for less effort. Like, why we want to be relaxed and calm. And if our training needs to, 80% of our training should be relaxing. We should be able to breathe through our nose for a lot of that. We should be running. When we run, we should be able to close our mouth and breathe in and out through our nose. So I challenge your listeners to do that. Some people probably couldn't even walk up a hill doing that. If that's the case, you need to really think about your body composition and your health and how you're training. And so you really got to question yourself, is the advice I'm following the right advice, or is it from someone that's got a vested interest in just keeping me coming back to them? Because I won't work with anyone that doesn't want to work the way I do. So I'm throwing money away. So I don't have any vested interest, right? But, a personal trainer in a gym, not disparaging them, but they want you to they want you to improve. They want you to get strong. They want you to be confident, but they make money every time you come and see them. Same with the gym. A gym wants you to keep coming back, and they've always got the cafe generally with the protein shakes, which are atrocious, and the sugary foods, because you think people give them what they want. So I don't give people what they want. I tell them what they need, and I help them learn what is good for them, and they see the results because we track their MAF test. We do a MAF test every month, whether it's on the bike or whether it's a running test. And we track their results. And, yesterday I got this guy in Chicago, I think he is, or Illinois, Chicago. Paul is his name. And he did a MAF run test and a MAF bike test 2 months ago. He's already dropped a minute off his pace working in his MAF heart rate. So he's gone from 7.5 minutes to 6.5 minutes running 5 kilometers at the same heart rate, all by doing a big block of 2 months worth of aerobic training. So we track all of this. So I don't know whether I went on a tangent there, but that's sort of my approach, is to ask people to really question themselves, is if they're not getting the results they deserve, ask themselves, what's that about? And if they've been doing that for years and waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to a CrossFit or a F45 class with a bunch of 50 other people that are all overweight or all struggling with their health, and then all going out for a cappuccino afterwards, maybe you should sleep in and go for a walk with the dog and just not eat till 11 o'clock and eat some eggs and steak. Like, I had lamb chops yesterday at 11 o'clock, lamb chops with cabbage, Brussels sprouts, 2 eggs, and I didn't eat again till 6 o'clock last night.
Yeah, I love it. I really love it. That's the approach that, we're on the same page there, advocating the same kind of approach. So that brings me to sort of mindset. I'm a bit aware of the time, and I don't want to sort of abuse your time too much, but there's just so many other questions I could ask you. But just coming back from that a little bit, could we just have a bit of a talk about mindset? Because this is something, obviously, you've done a lot of training and is about behaviour change and coaching and things like that. So how do people change their behaviours? I mean, to me, the obesity epidemic is kind of like just about a collusion of people together. You know, everybody is overweight. Everyone just thinks it's normal. You know, any thoughts and comments on that? I mean, that's, I think, where I see the role of a coach as well, is an accountability partner rather than so much of saying this is what you've got to do or eat every day. It's being accountable to somebody.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there. So firstly, my approach is to help people be accountable to themselves, because I want them to sack me when they've achieved their goals, right? So part of my approach is, as a coach, is helping people be accountable to themselves and to whatever's important to them. And I just sort of guide them along the way with that. But I would say the first thing to do is pull out some photos of what your grandparents look like, or your great grandparents look like, or search for AC/DC 1970 in Swanston Street or Burke Street Mall, and look at a photo, or look at photos of Bondi Beach in 1965 or 1970, or some street or fancy beach in New Zealand. And you have a look at the black and white photos, and every single person will be skinny. Mm. And then you look at a photo, you have a look at a photo or go there now, and if you're skinny, there's something wrong with you. So, like, as an example, right, my mother-in-law, one of her daughters is morbidly obese. When I went to her house after I lost my weight, my mother-in-law said to me, "You look sick." Mm. And she would never say that to her daughter, who's morbidly obese. Mm. But, you know, so this thing about changing our mindset starts with the understanding that being obese or morbidly obese or heavily overweight, it's not normal, and it's actually really bad for your health. And looking in the mirror and saying, because people put on a little bit of weight every year and they just don't see it as a big change. But if you look at a photo of yourself when you were 18, that's what I do with my people. I say, I've worked with a lot of guys from the army who graduated from Duntroon. And by the time I finish working with them, nearly all of them are back to the weight they were when they were at Duntroon. I've got clients on my website that talk about that they are lighter than when they were 19 and now they're 55. So I ask them to get a photo of their graduation or when they're in a footy team, and I say, that's normal. Where you are now isn't. And, you know, you need to decide if you want to be like that or like this, and where are you going to be in 10 years? So I ask people in our initial interview, have they got grandkids? Have they got kids? You know, how are they going to be when they're walking down the aisle with their daughter at the wedding? Are they going to be able to walk, or are they going to be in a wheelchair? Like, what's their life going to be like if they don't make a change? And that can be quite emotional at some stage.
I think what you said in the beginning about, you know, seeing yourself in the bathroom mirror and then sort of that realization that, oh gosh, I'm fat. I think it's a really complex subject, because I've been looking at I've been thinking a lot about the fat shaming, and I did a bit of research, delving into the research about body image and things like that. And there was some UK research that said that 73% of people are ashamed or disgusted by their bodies. And so we've got this like complex sort of thing going on where, you know, we don't want to make people feel bad. We don't want to say, gosh, you're fat. You're overweight, and yet we've got to do something about it, because the chronic disease epidemic is just killing people. It's just blowing us away.
Yeah. So I try and use the word body composition when I'm dealing with clients as much as I can, and ask them, how do they feel about their body composition? You know, what do they want to change about it? You know, if I've got a guy who I've been a mate with for a long time, we'll stir each other about being fatties or whatever. But generally it's about, well, you know, how do you want to change your body composition? And also not blaming them, because it isn't. So to anyone that's listening to this, generally speaking, it's not your fault if you're overweight.
It's hilarious you say that, because I just did a little workshop the other night, and it was why it's not our fault we get fat. So
Yeah. You've just followed. In fact, there should be a class action against the New Zealand, Australian and American and UK governments, because they're the ones that have told us to eat like this. And that's the reason people's body composition is not right. And for all those wonderful traditional people in New Zealand and Australian, Indigenous peoples and the Maoris, it's not your fault either, because you've had shops set up with all this horrible processed foods that your ancestors never ate. The same in Australia with our Aboriginals. They don't eat their traditional food. They don't eat the traditional way. They've been forced to eat this horrible processed junk food that food companies have made addictive deliberately, so that we continue to buy their food.
I know.
So,
our guidelines still say, 11 servings of, well, I think it's 5 to 7 servings of carbs, of starchy carbs, so bread and cereals and grains a day. And they tell us less than 500 grams of red meat a week, and exchange your butter for margarine or vegetable oil. I mean, that's just, they should be sued for.
Yeah. But it makes sense. Like it does. So that's the other thing for your listeners. It does make sense that if you eat fat, you'll get fat. And if you eat fat, you'll have a heart attack. And if you exercise more calories than you eat, you'll lose weight. It totally makes sense. But I really urge people that are saying, what the hell's this guy and this lady on about, is really ask yourself the question is, go on the internet and search for what's the main street where do you live in New Zealand?
I live in a little town called Kawerau.
All right. So let's say, look at the main street in Auckland and go on the internet and say, let's say the main street in Auckland is, I don't know, Kiwi Avenue, right? Kiwi Avenue photos, 1965.
Yeah.
And then compare that to what you see today. That is a direct result of the food guidelines of food companies making processed junk food horrible, and people just thinking that it's normal to be overweight and be unhealthy. Like, it's not. And people can change this, but the first thing they've got to do is change the way they think that, yes, they can make a change. What's the purpose of making the change? Is it so that you can be around for your grandkids and not be a diabetic in a wheelchair with one leg, or not have arthritis, or not have a heart disease? Because you could get cardiovascular disease from being overweight, not from eating fat, but eating sugar. And you can make these changes if you really want to have a different future. You've got to have a reality check on, where am I and where do I want to be? Then you've got to have the knowledge of what to actually do. Then you've got to be able to execute it and implement it. So they're the three things I work on with people. Is usually people have sort of realized the first one by the time they come to a coach, that something's not right and they want to make a change. But then they have to learn what they need to do, i.e. no bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, get rid of the dairy, eat good fats, blah, 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 and reduce your eating windows, and how you exercise. And then it's like, how do you implement that in a busy life with a lot of stress, with a family, with a husband or wife that might be skinny or doesn't want to support you? And how do you implement that? That's the sort of stuff that, as a coach, as a health coach, that I work with people on. It's not just what you eat, but then how do you actually take that into your life? And then often, during my program, people lose their weight and then they say, oh, now I want to start exercise. So then we say, well, okay, let's start talking about, how does appropriate exercise look for you, given your background and your issues that you have been dealing with? And you've got to think about all of those factors and how it fits in with the family, and how do social occasions fit in here as well? How do you go out with your mates or your girlfriends and have a coffee, like I don't drink coffee, but apparently coffee and milk, cappuccinos, woohoo, the biggest things in sliced bread, so to speak. How do you go out and socialize and not eat because you don't want to eat without saying to your friends, I'm trying to lose weight? Because you don't need to tell your friends you're trying to lose weight, because then they'll judge you. They're all the sort of psychological things and mindset stuff, I work with people on. Oh, bright lights coming in as the sun's coming up. So I don't know whether that sort of helps address that question or not, but there's some things that I focus on with people.
Yeah, I think it's fabulous. Look, we're over our hour and I could just keep talking to you. There's so many other things, stress and sleep and all these other really, really important aspects to health that need consideration. And I know that you deal with them with your coaching program. And I think you've got a bit of information about some of those topics on your website.
Yeah. So if people go to my website, andreobradovic.com, I'm sure you can put the link there. They can actually download my health and wellness app. It's free. It has an area with recipes. It has an area called free stuff. And in there's recipes, low carb recipes. There's videos. There's the area called Wellness Wednesday. And every Wednesday, there's a podcast or video that comes out that's in there, and that's all free. There's also a members area, which is a paid subscription, but the website has some blogs, has a lot of client facing information, but my app is really the best way to get the most up-to-date information, because I don't particularly write a lot of blogs. It's more on the app. And the other thing is they can follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I don't do Facebook, so I'm not there, but LinkedIn or Twitter, or the best way is to download my app, and that gives them a whole lot of great content. And I'll put our podcast up on there once it's done as well.